We are so excited about this part of today's agenda, which is our wonderful keynote speaker this year is our friend, Misconception Coach, who is now our friend in real life instead of me just being a social media fan until recently. But we are so excited to have her with us because she has such a warm and supportive spirit on social media and in her work as a coach. And we find that more than almost any other social media account, I feel like when I see anything she posts, I'm like, share to story, because we're so aligned, I feel, in our missions and in our approach. And so, for those of you who don't know or have not found her yet, you're in for a treat. And you can find our friend here at Chiemi at misconceptioncoach.com and on all your different social media platforms, especially Instagram, also Facebook and Threads. Always, you can find her at Misconception Coach. And I encourage you to do so and also to read her full bio that's in our conference materials. But we are just so excited to just have a lovely conversation today, and sort of virtually with all of you who are listening. And I'm fortunate that I get to have it directly with Chiemi today. So we're just going to jump right into it. Do you want to say anything first, or we'll just get right into it?
I'm just so excited to be here. So thank you so much. It was such a privilege when you guys reached out and I jumped at the chance to just connect and be part of this amazing conference, which I heard was 30 years in the running, which is incredible. So hats off to you guys for just keeping that going.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And there's no one we could have better at the Resolve New England 30th conference than you. So this morning, there's so many things we could have talked about, but one of the things that unfortunately is all too prevalent in struggling to grow your family, I would say, are two big things. One is waiting, which seems like it is inevitable for any aspect of fertility and family building is inevitably there is waiting. So we'll get into that if we can. But probably another common thread is disappointment.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, most people don't get out of this struggle to become parents or to grow their families without experiencing disappointment. And that can take many different forms, many different parts of this journey can cause disappointment. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think those are the two words that really jumped out at us when we were thinking and collaborating about some of the ideas around what this whole journey takes out of us, right? From just the diagnosis alone, and that's kind of complicated. Just the processing, I think, of what that feels like to have to acknowledge and now deal with something like that. Because it's not the way that I think a lot of couples or even individuals assume or dream that they will end up, starting a family and growing a family. So that's where I think it's a really important thing to have that support and community of just even being part of a diagnosis like that. And then just all the information that takes, right? Of the Googling and the searching and, just your own individual story, which I think is so unique to this whole community. Even though we have so many different people working through this space, it's really an individual journey and it speaks to your own needs. So, yeah, I think just even from the get go of having to deal with that, and I guess approaching treatment and deciding. And that's also something that's a really, I think, nuanced space of not everyone can, has the privilege to even do treatment and if it's accessible. And we know your work that you guys do tirelessly of just trying to make that something that's more accessible. So I think we have to be really soften the wording of when we, acknowledge and suggest treatment to people, because it's not always something that they're able to receive due to their own medical, individual cases. And also just, yeah, the cost. And also I think where I work with a lot of people is also in the emotional side of it. Yes, we might be able to do treatment and go through IUIs and IVF, but the toll that takes emotionally, physically, mentally, the exhaustion of just that having to contemplate it and starting that protocol. So yeah, every step along the road of right of processing and waiting and just coming to terms with all of that is really where the support is needed for sure.
Mhm. And as you said, sometimes people say things in a well-meaning way, mostly, that, they might give you advice like you should do this or have you tried this? And they
Right.
assume that, or they seem to assume that some of those paths to parenthood, whether it's fertility treatment or adoption or other avenues of building a family, that they are easy and accessible in any way, financially, emotionally, logistically. um, there's almost like they have the privilege of thinking that it's easy. And so they pass that perspective on to you. But for those of you and those of us who have been researching what those things entail, we realize that it is not that simple. Um, and I think another big thing that we, have talked a lot about and we hear a lot about from our community are though how do we deal with our friends and family and loved ones who of course want the best for us but manage to just say or ask the wrong things so much of the time, and they may feel us pulling away from them, particularly if they're newly parenting themselves and they have trouble dealing with that. So do you have suggestions or thoughts on how to kind of navigate that your community of support
Mm.
might not really understand what you're going through?
Yeah, there's so much I think, when we think about awareness and advocacy, it really starts from sort of busting a lot of these myths and misconceptions about just do IVF and it's sort of a one and done situation, which seems to be a really big misconception.
Oh yeah.
So there's that stigma around that's a quick fix, and if you have to do IVF, you just do it, and then your miracle baby comes and everything is fine. But yeah, there's a lot of spaces that I think people have a lack of awareness, and I think the grief around the treatment is a lot of the biggest one, honestly, of what people go through and how they grieve their just even the dream of how this was going to unfold. We didn't expect 10 people to be in a room when we're starting our family and planning our growing our family. So just having to I think it's good to normalize that it really is a grief that we come to terms with, and that even though some things are very common and they happen to almost everyone, it doesn't make it any less um, hard to do or just be in that space. So that's one thing I really like to normalize is, yeah, it felt really uncomfortable, probably because it was ultrasounds and just blood work and all of these things that people go through. And just to really normalize that it's okay if that's taking a toll, right? It's okay to complain and vent and just say, yeah, I'm really exhausted and I just need a break, or I need some more comfort and support.
And to me, it's like there's nothing more important than your health and well-being. Like I think you learn growing up to like sort of have your manners and be polite and
Mm,
don't, sort of prioritize yourself versus maybe being polite and like accepting an invitation to some party or baby shower or something like that. But to me, it's like you can politely decline an invitation that your emotional well-being cannot bear to do. And I think it takes time to feel comfortable that like no or graciously like unfortunately I can't make it is like a complete sentence.
yes.
And depending on the relationship, they don't need more of an explanation than that. Or if you have to tell a little white lie, which I can say I definitely did during my own fertility journey, if particularly if the person wasn't super close, I just did not go to baby showers. I just was sick,
Yes.
which
I know.
I was.
It's true, right? Because I feel like we wear so many hats. And I think like what you're saying, we probably have work friends and then we have colleagues and we have acquaintances and family and friends that are in our more inner circle. And I think we have to really get clear on who has access to information and just the intimacy and vulnerability of that space. And it doesn't, not everyone is privy to that, which is a good boundary to think about right away. Even family and friends that are close to us, like sometimes we decide at the, at the get-go that we're going to share the protocol and the dates and the timing, but we sometimes feel a little bit of pressure on top of that, people checking in and kind of following up during the 2-week wait, and then wanting to know the results. That feels like a lot of stress and pressure sometimes. So it's nice to just kind of reframe that, like it's okay to feel selfish right now and just really prioritize your needs. And if that
Yeah.
means, just taking a break from social media or social events. And I always remind people it's just for now, and things change. So whatever we need right now in this space, it might not be the same in a week or 2 weeks from now. So really to just continuously be true to what you need right now in the moment. And we know in this world that changes daily. So
Mhm.
no, you have to really, that's the hard part too, is the uncertainty and the changes that always happen, whether it's, the physical part, the hormones, the medication, they all take a toll too on our, our mental health and emotional health. So
Definitely.
just normalizing that it's not you that's not handling things, and it's not you that's being antisocial or a bad friend, or anything around the lines of that. It's really just you experiencing what you're going through and trying to process it. And this is all in real time, like you've never done this before, and that's that compassion piece, right, that we really have to be um, to kind of rise that voice up a bit of, I shouldn't know what to do, I've never done this before, or I've never felt this way, I haven't gone through these emotions. So it's okay, like they say, it's your first rodeo here. You're not supposed to really know or have a good grasp, and that's
Mhm.
normal, that's okay, human.
Yeah. And to be compassionate to yourself is
Yes.
most important, but sometimes the hardest to do. And one thing which I did not do, so do as I say, not as I did, but I think it just took time for me to kind of see, and not that there's one right answer, but my suggestion with really close people is to just kind of tell them, to the extent you know what that is at that time, what you need from them and what you don't want from them. And then I feel like if people don't if you're very clear about what you need and the people don't honor it, you really then have grounds to like really address it with them.
Yeah.
Where, like I said, when some people kind of falter and say the wrong thing, um, one of our lovely members of our community is a mental health professional named Ellen Glazer. And she used an expression one time that I love, which is that sometimes we have to be a gentle teacher
Mhm.
and tell people, you know, I know you mean well, but that's a hurtful thing to ask. Or my thing now is just that it's very hard for people to argue with responding to any question you don't want with, I don't feel comfortable answering that, or I don't feel comfortable talking about that. That usually shuts someone up, hopefully, right away.
Yeah.
Because, if you don't feel comfortable with something, that is the end of the conversation, hopefully.
Yes,
So, yeah.
absolutely. And I think we're getting better too on the other side of the cultural social side of what is acceptable these days. And I feel like there is a little bit of a movement of, we know not to ask people if they have kids, which I think even a few years ago that would have been surprising. But I think the more mindful we are at, that's a very personal question that actually has a lot of triggers and other activated spaces when asked to somebody. And especially, I think, in the workspace of not having those boundaries that, like we're talking about, that you can kind of share with friends and families, but colleagues, it's a little bit different. And I feel like sometimes even in meetings, people will just default to, do you have kids? And, that sort of small talk, which I know a lot of people share is really that all of a sudden my work, it doesn't feel safe to me anymore, and I have to now worry
Right.
about, so how do I look on this meeting, and how it can really bring up all those emotions. So
Yeah.
I like the trend now of being more mindful about, let's not ask people about even their status of marriage or whatever it is, just really personal questions.
Yeah, I mean, my mom is part of a faith community that I went to services with her one year on Mother's Day, and they specifically gave flowers only to the mothers. They asked the mothers to stand. And I remember just thinking, this is so hard for the people that I know are in this room that have dealt with or are dealing with fertility and loss. And so I shared with my mom, which she shared with her faith community, that they needed to find another way to honor, in some way honor everyone, or even if they wanted to be gendered, honor every woman in that room, but not singling out the mothers in such a clear way. And it doesn't mean you're not honoring those who are mothers, or define themselves as mothers. There's ways to honor them without excluding other people in a way that could be so hurtful. So I think we make progress, like even one little bit at a time, and trying to make those things, as you would say, more compassionate. Um,
Because I think that's such a beautiful example of where it was a gentle awareness nod, a little bit of, hey, have you guys thought about that, and how a little, some people in the room might be affected by that. And sometimes, I mean, we can all say, honestly, we've all been there where we probably stick our foot in our mouth. But it's the awareness of thinking, oh my goodness, right, I didn't think of that. Now that I've thought about that, I've learned something, and how wonderful that is to just hold space like that for people.
right. And you can't take back what you did or said, but you can change, and make it better next time. And that's how we learn. Um, And yes, there are so many misconceptions as well. So you do have a wonderful name. It is so perfect. Uh, and so again, what we were talking about disappointment before, for those individuals and couples who are currently trying to grow their families, as we said, there's so many, unfortunately, aspects of this journey that can be disappointing. And one thing that sticks with me, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, is that I really feel like every person's truth is valid and is their truth. So I feel like there's some people who um, felt that any unsuccessful IVF transfer, for example, was a loss. They were actually grieving that desire, that experience and that hope that was in that embryo. And then I know others wouldn't describe it as a loss, although obviously I have never met anyone who isn't disappointed after the end of a cycle, and an unsuccessful cycle. And so could you talk a little bit about that, just how each person's journey is so unique from an emotional perspective, and how they can maybe cope with some of these challenges?
Yeah, because I think like what happens is we start to use words that are very kind of tangible, linked to how early were you, how many weeks were you, how many times have you, like it's almost like we have to earn our spot in this grief conversation. And what we're really grieving is not anything tangible per se, but also just the dream that we had attached to that. And I think going through treatment is one of those places where we start to attach so early. We're literally working with days and numbers, and so it's natural to all of a sudden feel really emotionally attached to this process, because it's your heart and soul, it's everything that you have put into this together, and sometimes just by yourself too. But it's a place that I think needs more compassion from people to understand, that kind of loss is definitely a loss. And your identity is really what you're grieving of. I saw myself in the future with this family in this way. And sometimes we know the gender and we even attach automatically to that specific story. And all of these things are so important. And sometimes we can feel like, oh, that's not a big deal in comparison to other things happening in the world. But it's the biggest, your grief is always the biggest one because it's yours and it's the one you're living in. So it's okay to I just try to walk through some of these, all those small things. They do add up in moments that I really wish it had turned out differently. And I'm just sad about that. And using that sort of sentiment of it's okay to just be sad. It's okay to just be sad that it didn't turn out the way you wanted in the way you wanted. And let's just kind of talk about that.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I think that the miscarriage and pregnancy loss and embryo loss, it's all so similar in that you had pictured yourself as a mother already. And having that kind of didn't take it away. It's not that you're just grieving that, but you're grieving having to just start over again. And that's a really hard space too of, a cumulative loss and different kinds of medical traumas and that sort of space.
Mhm. And I think sometimes, again, like our own voices to ourselves are sometimes the most hurtful ones because sometimes I feel like we might say, like, "Oh, you should be over this by now," whatever that means, over this, or, and I really believe that, like, how you feel is how you feel, and that all those feelings are valid. We can't really control the way we feel. We can control our words to a point. We can certainly control our actions, but not our feelings. And so I wish we would be gentler to ourselves about those, because the emotions you feel are hard enough.
Yeah.
So if on top of those, uh, and we can talk about what some of those are, some of those emotions, if on top of that you also feel guilt for feeling them,
Yeah.
then you're really compounding your suffering. Exactly. Because I think some of those emotions are unfamiliar to many of us and certainly unwelcome. They're like not just the sadness, of course, but also jealousy, anger. Can you talk about some of those that might be kind of like new new things on the horizon for us?
Yeah, I think it's so healthy to talk and normalize, just all these different responses that we have and reactions that we have to not even the person. It's never like a personal thing when for example, if we saw a pregnancy announcement or having to see someone with a very obvious bump, it's not them and us, it's just what that activates inside of us. And I think it's really helpful if we can remind ourselves that it's such a natural thing to have, right? Envy or anger or frustration. And to just get curious about it. And so when we talk about this kind of stuff in sessions, it's let's step back just a sec. We really want to honor all of those things that are coming up, but let's just take a step back for a second, see, get curious. I wonder what that activation is really trying to signpost me to. Is it like, for example, resentment? Usually resentment is about somewhere my voice is too quiet, somewhere I see somebody else getting something else. Probably they had to work half the time and got twice as much. Right? So our voices, oh, I don't like that. It's not fair, it's unjust, it doesn't make sense. So it's such a natural response. But I think instead of tipping into then why am I feeling it, or the guilt and shame around it, we can say, well, I wonder what it's telling us. It's probably telling us that we actually need to comfort ourselves a bit more. What can we add to our exhaustion? Probably more support and more hugs and more comforts. And it's interesting, as soon as we sort of add more of that, the stress kind of relaxes and we feel less alone. And we realize, okay, there are people that do care and I'm actually not alone. And actually, there are a whole bunch of people that I can relate to and that do see me and I do belong there. So, but I love thinking of emotions of not neither good or bad, but just um, cues to something. What is it trying to tell me?
I love that. I mean, that's even better and beyond what I was even thinking, which is exactly, I think the first step is kind of not thinking of them as good and bad, and then saying, what is this teaching me? What is this telling me? I love that.
Yeah.
And nurturing ourselves. I mean, I think one of the hardest things about this is that you cannot control the outcome, and that a lot of things in life, if you try harder, if you want them more, you achieve it. And even people say that, like, practice and you'll get great, or whatever it might
Practice
be. And
makes
it's like,
perfect.
this
Yeah.
is something where like, because I see people all the time say like, oh, I had like beautifully graded embryo, or I, did everything. We're in some ways the most knowledgeable patients ever. Um, but then we can't control like the outcome, which is so hard. But so one thing we can control is like how gentle we are to ourselves, how much we nurture ourselves. And even for me, I find like sometimes I couldn't even like drag myself like anywhere. But like I did feel better if I got some fresh air, even just a walk. Um, something it doesn't have to be major, and but something like that. And just that like I need to remember there's like this big world out here. And as you said that this is my experience right now, but not necessarily forever. And I don't know the outcome, which is really hard. But I just need to be a little bit gentle to myself about where I am right now.
I love that. And I think we also have to kind of acknowledge as women, the physical person that's going through all of this, the medical side and emotional side is we have a lot of systems that we're kind of working within. And I think without acknowledging that we already in a culture of kind of a toxic message about weight and worth and you know, work to deserve rest, and even the pressure of adding self-care of like now we're supposed to make time for self-care and now it's just another list of things to do. But
Yeah.
I think we also live in a culture that tells us it's not our fault, but then sells us 10 million things to help improve ourselves. And it's like, well, which is it? And I always like reminding people, let's acknowledge that there's a lot of systems and a lot of messages that we're constantly filtering, right? Of scrolling through, and everyone, that feeling of having, say, an unsuccessful cycle, and you jump onto the Mr. Google because you want to do research and find out, and we end up scrolling to see, and we're looking for some sort of confirmation or some sort of connection of good or bad or where to go next and what to feel, right? So it's so natural to do, but I think it's okay to also just say, I know I need to pause a lot of these places because the messages are conflicting and confusing and not always helpful. So I'm not a huge believer in giving yourself like a 10-minute kind of thing every day, because sometimes people say, well, give yourself 10 minutes to Google, but or test or kind of having these really concrete structures. I just say, you know what, there's no shame in anything that you need to do to sort of just ease stress and anxiety. If testing early is that for you, that's okay. But maybe
Mhm.
let's think about, is it giving you the reassurance you're really needing? There's no shame for wanting that, but I wonder what it will give you. And whatever the answer is, what do you think that's going to feel like? Is it beneficial? Right? There's no sort of negative coping. There's just ones that were helpful before, might not be as helpful now. But we tend to shame people for how they survive in this space. And I think and like you said, we start shaming ourselves. So right off the bat, it's so nice to just say there's no such thing as a bad way of coping. And I like to praise people. Good for you. You jumped into work because you knew what to do. You knew what to do when you're feeling that stress, and you dived into something that made you feel worthy and good and productive. And I just like adding more of that. What else can we do that makes you feel that way? And don't shame yourself if you spend an hour going down a rabbit hole of Google searches. And that's okay. You're just trying to gather information. But I think under that information, we're also trying to find connection and comfort because we don't want to feel alone here. So I think that's a really nice thing to reflect on, is where else can I maybe bridge that? Like you said, can I go outside and just step away for a bit? Can I have like a date night with my husband, or can I go out with friends and just connect with anyone that makes us feel safe and cared for?
Yeah, I love that. Well, yeah, I mean, as really the cornerstone of our mission at Resolve New England is community, which is that as we said, we can't control the outcome, but we can control going through a difficult time with other people who can relate to it and make it a little easier to go through it by having that community around us. So, certainly our support groups, but really everything we do, we try to do with an eye towards connection and community. And certainly, I know that's a hallmark of your work with the people that you serve directly, as well as, like I said, the tone of your messages on social media are so wonderful and so appreciated. So I really want to thank you for that. Um, so I can't believe we're like almost out of time, but any closing remarks for our audience today?
Well, I thank you so much for just, yeah, supporting my page and following my work that I post. And it's, I think, really why it resonates to a lot of people is because it's the truth. Whether it's talking about hard things, embarrassing things, things that are hard to talk about, really vulnerable and really intimate. It's okay to just share the truth. And I think that's refreshing when we don't have to live in a positive state or a hopeful state or not feeling sad. It's okay to just say, I'm having a really sad day. I don't have much hope. And, I'm just not okay today. Like all of that is just accepted and welcomed. And I love when I post something and people respond back of, oh my goodness, I thought I was the only one that felt like that. Me too. And it just
Yes.
that building of let's normalize some of these really hard spaces, and we know we're not the only one that's feeling it. There's something so nice about that because we can't take away, we can't fix. And I think we hear that platitude from so many people in a lot of places. Just stay positive, just relax, don't worry, don't stress. It'll happen for sure. And our brain is like, well, you don't know that. And it feels sort of patronizing. So it's nice to just say, yeah, it makes sense why you're really stressed because this is really stressful. Is there something I can do to help?
Yeah.
And that's like real support, right? Versus, don't worry, it'll be fine. So I think
Right.
being with other people that can, there's something really strong about being able to vent about our truth and show up how we are. You don't have to have a smile, you don't have to be hopeful, you can just show up and really be honest about it. That feels so authentic and refreshing.
For sure. Well, thank you for everything that you do and for being so compassionate and authentic and for being our 2023 keynote speaker.
Yes,
And we'll have to welcome you to New England sometime in person.
I know, one of these days. Thanks so
Love
much.
it. We would love it. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.